instead of just rebuilding the scene, I designed my LEGO version to actually move like a movie stunt. I needed the motion to feel smooth, but the model still had to look clean, which means I had to test it, break it, and rebuild it multiple times. As a long-standing James Bond fan, all that effort was worth it. I built a launch pad with a jetpack and even made a stop-motion takeoff from the Aston Martin, although my technique was far from perfect. So I asked myself, what if I built this like real movie stunt? Just like the mechanism I once made for a Star Wars scene, Anakin and Obi-Wan's duel on Mustafar. That way, everything will be real. The movement, the mechanism, the play feature, all of it. Sounds like a super fun idea to me. Or should I just make it in stop motion? Walking and shooting would be easy that way. But honestly, that'd be too boring. So I decided to do it the hard way. The first step, make Bond walk. More specifically, at least make his legs move. My first idea was to use two long plates and attach the legs onto them. By moving the plates back and forth, I thought I could make Bond walk. So I tested with Bond, but it only took less than 2 seconds to realize it would come off the studs. So I tried to stabilize Bond's body using this piece. It adds a stud on the back of the minifigure, which lets me connect angled elements to build a small holder for Bond. One end attaches to the minifigure and the other connects to the base. This way, the torso stays locked in place. But it didn't work. Bond fell off again. And at this point I realized something fundamental. This mechanism would never make a minifigure walk. And here's why. The legs follow a curved path, but the plates only move in straight lines. To solve this problem, I looked at other LEGO mechanisms for inspiration, and I noticed something in the Hogwarts Express, a side rod connecting the wheels to the train chassis. As the wheel rotates, the rod doesn't just spin, it moves back and forth in a straight line, changing angle as it moves. That's when I thought this structure might work. So I built a simple prototype linkage that can move up and down loosely when driven from one end. Since the holder was still useful, I kept it and attached Bond's right leg to the linkage. Can this actually make the leg move? Yes, it works! The minimal prototype was successful. Now I just needed to extend it to both legs. That meant building two linkages with these two slots holding them in place. And interestingly, this whole structure is very similar to an elliptical trainer. Additionally, I upgraded the holder into a slimmer version. Now it stayed upright, right behind the minifigure. With Bond securely placed on the elliptical trainer, he finally walked smoothly, just like a real person. I was still one step away from making Bond walk. At this point, he could only move in place, not travel forward. That's why I need these rack pieces. By lining up into a rail, I could mount the entire base onto a moving platform. Once the gear engages with the rack, it drives the whole structure forward. In this way, I completed the first challenge, making Bond walk. Moving on to the next stage, I had to study the motion more closely. It actually has two parts, turning the body and lifting the arm. So for step 2, I started with the turn. I replaced the bricks under Bond's legs with black ones and swapped the holder for transparent pieces. Both changes were part of a new, more compact base, one that hides the mechanism much better. After 3 iterations, the latest version finally achieved the clean look I was aiming for. And this is when I discovered a hidden sweet spot for the compact base. Its width basically determines how tightly it turns. Too narrow and there is no room for the two linkages. Too wide and the whole thing becomes clumsy. The original base was 8 studs wide, the new one is only 6. So when it turns, the new base is more agile. Next, another hidden mechanism. The idea starts with this blue gear plate connected to a turntable. Because the turntable spins freely, I fixed it onto a larger plate and built a small box on it. The secret is this hidden 2x2 brick. When the brick slides onto the blue gear, turning the gear forces the brick and everything attached to it to rotate. After testing the prototype, I built a rail over the mechanism just like the first base. I attached the green brick underneath the new base and gave it a test run. Bond walked all the way to the end, and when he reached the blue gear, one turn was all it took. Bond rotated 90 degrees. But soon I removed the rail. I needed to add more gear plates and extend them to the same side as Bond's base. This way, I could move the minifigure with one hand and make Bond turn when he reaches the right spot. And with that, the second challenge was done. Bond could turn. But I still wasn't satisfied. Could I combine the two motions into one system? That way, I wouldn't have to wait for Bond to reach the right spot and trigger the turn by hand. I wanted Bond to know exactly when to turn. So I built a simple stick to rotate the base around a fixed point, but that meant redesigning the rail. On the left side, I added a short rack section facing backward and then hid it inside the existing structure. Now, instead of manually turning Bond, I only needed to push the base, and Bond automatically turned to face forward. The gear underneath could turn Bond, but the problem was controlling the exact angle. So I brought out this piece, a simple solution. It worked as a hard stop, locking the base at exactly 90 degrees every time. Now I could push however I wanted without worrying about Bond looking like John A. English. The next challenge was lifting Bond's arm, and this was probably harder than making him walk because there was no way clean to attach anything. My first idea was to use a thin string, almost like Agent 47's fiber wire. But don't worry, this is not going around his neck. Instead, I built a pulley and a small stage. I placed Bond on the stage and attached the string to his pistol. Again, not as a hanger. The idea was simple: pull the string from behind, lift the pistol, and Bond's arm should rise with it. But this was just too ugly. I had to find a cleaner way to do this. Then I remembered an old project, Darth Vader Force choke scene I built before. For that effect, I used a transparent bar hidden alongside Vader's arm. The mechanism was hidden underneath, mounted on a Lego sloped hinge base. It was cleaner and more concealed. So I wondered, could the same trick work for Bond? So I used the same piece and pushed it from behind. The good news was, arm lifted. But the bad news was, it was still too clumsy. Can't have a wall behind it, and it often failed to create a natural pose. This idea was a no-go. I realized I had to approach it from the other direction. I needed a wall as a backdrop. I could only keep one brick with a hole because anything else will make the front look messy. Since it sits behind Bond's arm, I could use a transparent bar and push it through the hole from behind. This way, I could lift Bond's arm while keeping the front clean and tidy. But I still needed to motorize it, so I looked for inspiration from another project, Nick Fury being attacked by the Winter Soldier. In that scene, the Winter Soldier throws out a sticky bomb, it slides to Fury's car, and blows it up. I created that effect with a hidden mechanism. First, I used a magnet to guide the bomb. Even with a plate between them, the two magnets still attract each other. But the magnet only guided the motion. The real power came from a spring-loaded mechanism on the other side. I pressed down to lock the bar in place, then released it when the bomb reached the right spot. Since there was only one visible stud on the surface, the explosion felt unexpected. The spring-loaded launcher seemed like a promising solution, so I copied the same mechanism to build a bar that pokes through the hole in the wall. It had to be preloaded, and all I needed to do was to pull the trigger when Bond was in position. Actually, this works a lot like the click mechanism inside some ballpoint pens. When I tried to place the launcher, I realized the distance was extremely important. Too far from the hole and it wasn't powerful enough to lift the arm. Too close and it pushed the arm too high. Only the right distance worked perfectly, so the poke mechanism became the winner. It was time for the final audition. First, I built a stage for Bond. The rail came first, with all the gear racks lined up. Then I moved to the back and added the supports underneath the floor. Next, the walking base goes in. Then the wall. With a tiny hole designed for only one thing, letting the bar pass through. Finally, I placed the launcher on its platform, exactly the right distance from the hole. I pushed the stick all the way down. Bond turned automatically and lifted his arm. All three motions were finally working. Then I noticed the problem. I needed my right hand to push the stick and my left hand to press the trigger. So, could I make Bond walk, turn, and lift his arm with only one hand? Actually, I have an idea. This grand sloped piece might be the key. I mounted it on an elevated stick, then removed the launcher temporarily and added a new rail between the wall and the launcher. Now, when I push the stick all the way down, the green piece reaches the trigger and activates it automatically. Then I connected the red stick to a handle which linked back to the original stick I built. And that created the final control system. One simple push brought everything together, like swinging, Bond walking forward, turning and lifting his arm. But I didn't stop there. The gun barrel final shot. My first idea was to roll up a piece of black cardstock to make a barrel. Sometimes the simplest ideas are harder than they look. A round circle was almost impossible. So I found this Lego tire. It had the right shape, but there was still a problem. The four corners created gaps where light could leak through because the tire wasn't thick enough. To solve this problem, I even used a secret illegal building technique, turning the tire inside out. This gave the barrel more depth. I tested it, and it was round with no light leaks, but it was too dark. The barrel needed to look metallic and catch a little dim light. After more tests, I finally found this Lego piece. 4 of them form a perfect circle, and the plastic texture creates subtle reflections. So I used more of them to build a tunnel that finally looked very close to the gun barrel from the movie. Even better, the edges on these pieces created rifling grooves just like a real gun barrel. I also picked wheels with metal axles to build a moving platform for it because they have a much better payload than the plastic ones. To mimic the camera effect, I went back to my old Doctor Strange portal build, which opens up to create a round hole and reveal whatever is behind it. Since that hole matched the gun barrel perfectly, I decided to transplant the design and place it in front of the barrel. This design is much like the diaphragms inside a camera lens, and it also creates crisp mechanical sounds when operated. I mounted the portal and tested it with the barrel. Everything looked perfect and the gun barrel was all set except for one more problem. How could I synchronize this heavy barrel with Bond's movement? The solution was to connect it to the 2 sticks we just built. When I pushed the handle, the minifigure moved, the launcher triggered, and the gun barrel followed. The whole system was finally synchronized and automated under one control. Before the final shot, I just needed to find a place for my camera. It was not high enough to see through the barrel, and it couldn't move with the scene. To make it follow the action, I built one more platform for it. Now everything was ready. Let's see the final result.